Welcome back to the Clap Podcast. Will and I discuss the artistry of Donald Glover, known in the music industry as Childish Gambino. This follows the release of his newest project, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, available on Amazon Prime. We will discuss the course of Glover's rise in TV, music and film, and give our opinions on his latest show. Keep listening for more.
Hello, and welcome back to a special episode of the Clap Podcast, where we will be talking about Donald Glover, also known as Childish Gambino.
Yes.
We will go through his life, his filmography, his music career. I mean, he's been across all forms of entertainment.
Very influential in across media in general. He's one of those people that seems like he's very good at everything he does, and it's kind of annoying to the stage where it's like, do something wrong.
I know what you mean. He's been in some remarkable films. He's had some insanely good music.
Yeah.
And his story is fascinating.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of research, and we think it'd be great to talk about this in relation to his brand new TV show on Amazon Prime called Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yep.
Which we've both watched. We were going to get into our thoughts on it later in the episode, but he is still working really hard. He also had some directing and writing credits on Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So he's still also pursuing that avenue as well as acting.
Yep.
But we will give you our thoughts on that later in the episode. But let's talk about Childish Gambino.
Oh yeah, I think before we jump into it, I think this might be a segment that might do more regularly. We will pick an artist or creator involved in film or television, and we'll run through their life, how they got into the creative field, and then talk about their cinematography and all that type of stuff.
Yes.
So yeah, we're starting off just with Donald Glover, obviously because Mr. and Mrs. Smith has released fairly recently. We've both watched it, thought it was a good show, but we'll tell our thoughts about that later on. So I guess I'll just start off with some basic information. So his full name is Donald McKinley Glover Jr., and his stage name as a rapper is Childish Gambino. He's got quite some claims on him. So he's an American actor, comedian, singer, rapper, writer, director, and producer.
Wow, I feel like I'm doing nothing.
Yes, so he's
just co-host of a podcast.
Yeah, nearly ran out of breath for that one there. So he's currently 40, born 1983. He was actually born in Edwards Air Force Base in California.
Wow.
But raised in Georgia. And he was actually raised a Jehovah's Witness, which if you've watched the show Community, he actually portrays a Jehovah's Witness as well, which is very interesting. He has a brother, Stephen, who also is a writer and producer who collaborates with him a fair bit. He collaborates on some projects, including Atlanta. I think he worked a little bit on Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to check my notes on that one as well. So he went to DeKalb School of the Arts, and funnily enough, he was there in his high school yearbook. He was rated most likely to write for The Simpsons.
I see that now. I see that now.
Yeah, so obviously he was a creative very early on in his life, and already, being acclaimed for his potential.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, how he was recognized is he did write a script for The Simpsons, and he sent it through to David Miner, and David Miner was the executive producer of 30 Rock. He's also done some shows which it might be more recognizable. He did Parks and Recreation, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Masters of None, and The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Yeah, big sitcoms and TV shows there.
Big names. But I think I rushed a bit too far forward there. So Glover obviously graduated New York University Tisch School of Arts with a degree in dramatic writing. So I think that's how we see him writing a lot for the work that he does. I think that could also come up a lot in his music. He's a very good writer in his music, if anyone's listened to it. Very good storyteller throughout his music. And this is actually where he also started making some of his music. So he self-produced an independent mixtape called The Younger I Get, which remains unreleased. I'm not sure if he's a huge fan of that original project. He also went by the moniker MC DJ, which I think is slightly worse than Childish Gambino.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
But yeah, so he started writing for 30 Rock. Tina Fey, if anyone knows who Tina Fey is, she was the teacher in Mean Girls, just to put a face to it. But she has been involved in a lot of TV in general. So the show 30 Rock had some very big names in it as well. So it starred Tina Fey alongside Alec Baldwin, which I think is a massive name. I didn't actually realize he was in the show. Tina Fey is also in Megamind and Soul, just so you can put a voice to her as well.
Yeah.
So she's done some voice acting roles, but he was already acclaimed for his writing potential and picked up by the studio NBC. He would occasionally appear on the show as well. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't watched 30 Rock to see what he did there. I don't know if he was just like a background character or anything like that. But in 2008, the writers of the show were actually presented with the Writers Guild of America Award for Best Comedy Series. So
Wow.
That's already huge acclaim.
Major achievement. Yeah.
For what he was doing. But yeah, do you have any opinions about that?
I mean, obviously well deserved, but it's clear that his passion was really in writing, and the work that he did with that. It also just shows you that reaching out, sending your work to people in the industry is a really powerful tool that filmmakers or aspiring filmmakers and writers should look at Donald Glover's story for that reason, that he produced some amazing work, believed in it, and sent it to people who can do something with it. And even if they didn't use it for necessarily that project, it's seeing the potential through someone's writing or through someone's work.
Yeah.
And believing in them. And I think Donald Glover's story is a real testament to that. And you know, working with Tina Fey and working with producers like Minor, clearly they see the importance of incredible writing. And I only say that now because we're going into an age where AI is being used for more and more and things like that. And I think as we're probably going to talk about Mr. and Mrs. Smith later, the importance of really personable, interesting writing that can develop complex characters and emotional layers and storytelling in general is powerful and can elevate any production. And I think that's exactly what Childish Gambino brings to all his work, where you believe his dialogue, the moments have genuine heart, and I can't wait to see how he continues with his career.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things in particular is that it was a comedy writing that a lot of the stuff he was doing.
It was.
And if you've seen a lot of his projects that he's done later on, there's kind of like a surreal comedy to it.
There is.
I think it's that sort of Jordan Peele-esque type thing where you can kind of mix in these elements of really shocking and wicked ideas, but then try and make it funny to some certain extent.
Yeah.
And even in his writing and some of his music, he has some lines that may not fly in the present day, but I think in hindsight they're pretty funny and creative for what he's saying in the time.
And I think there's a lot of scenes that even if people haven't seen some, if not much of his work, there are certain scenes that people know about because they're great by themselves. I mean, even when he orders the Happy Meal.
The Happy Meal in Atlanta.
I think that's
season 1.
mean, I know people who've spoken to me about that who haven't even seen Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I'm one of them.
Yeah.
But that scene by itself stands up, and it has this pacing and comedic elements while also you're going, why can't he just order a King Burger?
Yeah.
That is a Happy Meal. Like, why is this a problem?
Yeah, we'll touch on Atlanta a little bit later on. I do have a lot to say about that sort of wicked comedy, but we'll progress a little bit more till we get to the part where he's very much directing and writing. I think one of the major things that happened for Glover, of course, was playing Troy Barnes in Community, a very, I wouldn't say famous, but somewhat niche to the same extent.
I think that's what a lot of people would know him for now, because that TV show has found a completely new life on streaming.
Yes, yeah,
people
revamped.
are revisiting it a lot.
Yeah. So that was actually created by Dan Harmon, I believe it is. So if anyone might recognize that name, he's obviously one of the creators of Rick and Morty, very popular TV show as well.
Massive comedy writer.
And yeah, it does definitely have that sort of comedy to it as well. If you do enjoy Rick and Morty, I'd recommend Community. It's not quite as nihilistic perhaps, but certainly funny, and Glover in it is fantastic. He's hilarious. I've had a lot of conversations with people who are fans of the show and say he carries it through until he leaves. But yeah, so that's
I would be someone who believes that as well, by the way.
Yes.
I love Community to a point.
Yeah.
And that's really how I feel about it. And I think a lot of that comes down to Troy Barnes' character just works within the tone of that film perfectly.
Yeah, so he did some big things during this time as well. So just before he started Community, he was part of the Derek Comedy, which was a sketch comedy group. And they actually did release a feature-length film called Mystery Team. And it premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2009. I can't say I've seen it. Can't say I've heard too much about it.
I've heard about this. Yeah,
thought it was an interesting fact to throw in there that this comedy group that he was a part of actually did release a film just as he was starting working at Community, the show, of course. But yeah, some big things happened to Glover during the filming of Community, and one of the really interesting ones that is still very much relevant today is that when they were casting the new actor for the Amazing Spider-Man film, a fan suggested Glover for the role.
Wow.
At the role of Peter Parker, of course, not for Miles Morales. But what is said to have happened, and to the extent that this is true or not, is that Miles Morales was in a way designed based off Glover. So Glover appeared in an episode of Community wearing, I think it was Spider-Man pajamas.
Spider-Man pajamas,
yeah,
yes.
and
they actually cameo that in Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes, I was going to say that. So Brian Michelle Bendis, I think, is the creator of Miles Morales, the character. He said he was inspired, at least in looks, by Glover. And then, he's been reappearing in Spider-Man franchises. He voiced a Spider-Man character in the Ultimate Spider-Man animated series, for starters, so that's big for him.
And he was in 3 major films. I mean, he was in Into the Spider-Verse in a brief cameo. He didn't really appear.
But it was still massive. You know how hard I was to see him in there.
But in Into the Spider-Verse, when for those of you who haven't seen it, because it's small, but when they go into
the Spider-Verse.
No, but I'm talking about Into the Spider-Verse, not the sequel.
Okay.
Where they have an episode of Community on the TV.
Yes.
And it's actually the scene where Donald Glover is wearing the Spider-Man pajamas, and they have an animated version of Donald Glover in that. And that was a little nod by the film creators of the inspiration that Donald Glover brought for the role. And then, of course, in Across the Spider-Verse, where he actually makes an appearance as the Prowler.
He's also in, of course, Spider-Man Homecoming. He plays the uncle of who would be Miles Morales. It's not known as the Prowler. I can't remember his name for the time.
Yeah, but he actually, and it's a post-credit scene or an extended scene or something. You actually hear him because his head is stuck through the back of his car.
No, I think it's when Spider-Man's walking away, you can hear him say, "Miles,
Miles, can you come get me?"
Yeah.
And I just think it's amazing how one fan choice casting led to, obviously he has incredible talent, but led to sort of Donald Glover having this experience in the MCU where he had the potential to be a role. They got sort of recast someone else.
Yeah.
Well, I guess he never got cast, but got chosen someone else, and they still acknowledge his absolute influence within the whole franchise.
I think it's actually one of those things that's like, could you imagine saying, to a certain extent, a superhero is based on me? Like, I think that's just a huge testament to the influence that he had, even in I think it was 2010 or 2011 or whenever it was. Like, that's massive. And I think if you haven't seen perhaps a lot of the content that he's creating, even if you don't listen to his music, the fact that one of the biggest animated films of this year, and what was it, 2 years ago for the original Spider-Verse, that character in itself is at least in part inspired by Donald Glover. Like, that's huge. I think that's just a massive testament to the influence that he had.
And they're not hiding it. I mean, they're outright putting him in these films to show his influence.
Yeah.
So it's a testament to the character that he is and the man that he is, that he has had this influence over the superhero universe, which is, as we know, completely within his own bubble at Disney and Warner Bros. And stuff. But he's still this guy who started off writing comedy has now had this influence on the MCU.
Yeah. So obviously he did a lot of stuff while he was still acting at Community. I don't know if you've seen this, but he actually did a stand-up showcase in 2010 for Comedy Central, I believe it was. It's pretty funny. I did watch it. He looks very young in it compared to current day. But I mean, it still demonstrates his work as a comedian as much as a writer. The fact that stand-up is such a different art form to the likes of writing scripts for like TV or movies or anything like that. So the fact that he was doing a 30-minute stand-up presentation is, in itself, like, maybe it's not the best stand-up of all time, but the fact that he was able to do it is still, I think, relatively impressive.
Totally. I mean, it's so hard for these stand-up comedians to get a platform to showcase their material.
Yeah.
And for Donald Glover to get a place where he can just share his jokes without the pressures of studio saying a character is going this direction or whatever it may be. And he has the ability to just come up and say, I just want to say jokes and tell stories of his life is really cool.
It's good. So we'll go back to the Community, because this is around the time that he was leaving. So there was a couple of dramas at the Community set. So Chevy Chase was one of the major actors in it.
Yeah.
And he left on slightly more, I don't want to say disgrace terms, but the report is that he said a racial slur and was then asked to leave the show. This was slightly before Glover left the show, but there is some...
So similar to his character then?
Yes, yeah, he was method acting as some might say. But yeah, no, I think that was one of a big loss for Community. As much as the character, I don't think many people actually enjoyed Chevy Chase's character all that much.
It wasn't my favorite.
No, I think that was kind of the point of it, though, from my understanding, is that you were meant to kind of test this character a little bit.
Yes.
He had like some redeemable characteristics, but all around he was kind of just a racist, misogynistic old coot.
Yeah, and it's always entertaining to watch these people navigate the conversations with him and his place within the group, and that is part of the atmosphere and the tone that is created by Dan Harmon.
Yes,
that plays a lot in the Community aspect, because I feel like a lot of us know people who are kind of like that. Yeah, and I think it plays a lot, and that's seen the success of many sitcoms, including Friends and How I Met Your Mother, where everyone has a distinct sort of character, and we can all relate to knowing people who are like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool how, don't get me wrong, Chevy Chase was clearly not a good person on set and did a whole bunch of things, but his character was, I don't want to say essential, but he was relevant within the context of the show.
Yeah, I think it definitely added to it early on.
Yeah.
I can't say I was too, like, unhappy to see him leaving.
No, I agree with that.
Even in the season that, because of this incident, I believe it was, that he started to appear on less episodes, or a very like little in each episode, like nearly just a cameo, until I think he finally was kicked from the show entirely at the start of season 5.
Right.
But yeah, so what the report is, and to the extent this is true, I don't know. It's very hard to find articles that actually go through the entire story of it. Is that obviously Glover, being African American, might have had issue with Chevy Chase, and that might have caused some tension on set. But Glover ended up leaving midway through, at the start of season 5. But what he claims is that he left just to pursue his own creative ideas.
Yeah, he had a lot more to give than that show.
Yeah, that was one of the things he said. I can't remember what the exact quote was, but it was something like, "I want to be involved in projects that like benefit myself, and like really work towards what I want to do." And I think Community had served him well in his acting, but he wasn't getting that creativity that he had in other projects that we see him doing. One of the other suspicions for the reason that he left the show was to pursue his music career. To the extent this is true, I'm not sure. His capacity to produce music at the same time as work on shows and his acting, I think he could have done it. Realistically, if he wanted to be a rapper and an actor at the same time, he had the capacity to.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I love hearing some of the stories of him doing both. And I know we'll get onto this production later on in the episode, but with Solo, they said that he played Is it This Is America?
Yes.
That he played that on the speaker system in the set of the Millennium Falcon.
Oh, really? That's
to
cool.
The cast. And it's things like that where he's still producing music and getting feedback and things like that from other people, whilst producing, I mean, as we'll get into, a large-scale Star Wars film portraying one of the most beloved characters in cinema.
Yeah, so I'll go into his music just a little bit here. So he actually had been releasing music as early as 2008. So he had some mixtapes called, first one was in 2009, I think it was called Sick Boy. He had Point Dexter. He had I'm Just a Rapper and I'm Just a Rapper 2 in 2010.
Brad Naps.
And then I can't actually, Cul-de-sac, sorry, the last one is. But then he started to do his major studio released albums, and this one will actually really interest you. He went to the composer of the music for Community, who is Ludwig, I'm going to butcher this last one,
Göransson. I do love Ludwig. He is one of the best composers in Hollywood.
Yeah, so I've put a list of some of the things that he's worked on. He's a massive name when you consider the fact that he's working on albums with Childish Gambino at the time, but some of the movies and TV shows. So he did Community, as I mentioned. He did New Girl, and he's still doing the Mandalorian soundtrack.
And that is iconic within Star Wars now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to compete with John Williams, but that opening of The Mandalorian will be forever ingrained in the minds.
Yeah, I knew you'd like that one. So some of the other recording artists he's worked with these are some massive names: Adele, Alicia Keys, Rihanna, and Kendrick Lamar. Just to name a few. There was a whole list. I couldn't put the whole thing in.
Oh, of course not.
But
even in the films, I mean,
Yes.
may I take over?
You
But
got it from here.
Oppenheimer, Tenet, Black Panther, Creed, Turning Red. These are films known for their scores. And you can see from that list, he didn't start off doing, to do a score for Christopher Nolan, of all people, twice, is as high as you can get within Hollywood. Because it's safe to say, Nolan is known for his scores.
Yeah.
And that genuinely comes down to some of the artists he's worked with, and Ludwig absolutely falls into that. I've said that I think the Tenet soundtrack is incredible. I mean, even in the post-credit, sorry, not the post-credits, but in the credits, you have a song with Travis Scott.
Yeah.
And Tenet, the rhythm of the music with the pacing of the film is perfect.
Yeah.
And Oppenheimer is sweeping at the Oscars with its score. We've seen Ludwig get up on stage multiple times to receive awards, and he's only going to get more.
Yeah, so he is massive, and I think he's involved in, I'm going to say for certainty, the first two of Gambino's albums. I'm not sure about Awaken My Love, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was. So Glover released, or Childish Gambino at this point, released his first album, Camp, in November of 2011. It had the singles Bonfire and Heartbeat. I'm sure you've heard them. Some of them are blowing up on TikTok if you rock that.
Yeah.
And the album debuted at number 11 and was very well received. I love this album. I actually have these 3 albums that I'm going to mention all on vinyl. So I'm a massive fan of Childish Gambino's music.
He's fantastic.
Camp is one of those, as I said earlier, he's got some lines in it that show off like that sort of shock comedy that he has.
Yes.
It's also very well composed by Ludwig. And fantastic performance by Glover. I don't think it was like hugely recognized as like one of the best rap albums for the year or anything like that. I think it's hard to compete when I think Kendrick Lamar was releasing some absolutely like groundbreaking albums at the same time, but certainly still respected in what he was doing.
And I think it was a bit off the mainstream as well. I think
a little bit, yeah,
a little bit. I'm not saying it's something completely different, but there's not a lot of artists I would really say is in the same realm as Childish Gambino in terms of every album I feel like he does, and every song you play on one of his albums feels very distinct. Yeah. Feels like it's telling its own story as he comes from a storytelling method.
So I find that each of his albums are very different. Like I think the first 2, they're very much rap albums, but even like they're just so different in theme. So the first one, Camp, is it's very much like your traditional rap. You say some outlandish stuff, you rap about girls, you rap about like partying and stuff like that, but then it still has some like very sincere parts of it. I think one song, I can't remember what it's called, one of the first songs, he's rapping about coming from an underprivileged community and like the difficulties of living in that community. It's a very good song. I can't remember it for the life of me right now. But yeah, I think for that, his albums are all unique in their own regard. His second album is called Because of the Internet, released in October 2017. I love this album. It debuted at number 7. It had singles 3005, which I would hope most people have heard. It's a massive song.
Yeah, I definitely have.
And Sweatpants as well, another massive song. But yeah, that album is fantastic. Very different from Camp, as in I feel like he was trying to tell more of like a linear story with it. So he was talking about how the internet has influenced media, how it's influenced people, and then the end of it just gets existential, and I love it. So my favorite song, if you want recommendations from me, the best song from Because of the Internet is Flight of the Navigator. That song is You Will Go to Heaven. It's such a good song. That's what I'm saying for you guys. His next album, I reckon, is probably his best album.
I would agree.
Just because it's the most unique.
Yeah.
And it really showcases his singing ability more than any of his other albums.
That's why I really enjoy it. I think it's my most listened to of Donald Glover's work.
So it's called Awaken My Love. That released in 2016. It charted number 5. And it's a very different direction from the rap. It's actually considered soul music.
Yeah.
And it had singles Me and Your Mama and Redbone. I think his best song is Me and Your Mama.
Right.
The song is brilliant. Everyone's heard Redbone as well.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think
Redbone is brilliant. It's a really good album. I believe it's talking through a love story and then going into divorce and coping with a child in that divorce. Is from my memory. I haven't listened to the album in completion for a little while, but very good album. Also showcasing his storytelling through music, and like the depth of what he can do with that. He did also release an album in 2020. It was untitled, or the title is the date it was released, I believe. It didn't receive as well just because it was untitled, and untitled albums are always difficult for people to enjoy, just because the songs don't have names.
Yes.
That's my biggest issue. Like, I don't want to be like, oh, I like 30.20.
Yeah.
Like, I need to know the name of the song. But yeah, I think his music, he was doing this all at the same time as doing some massive work in his shows, and that's what we're going to be talking about predominantly from now on. Do you have any other notes you want to talk about with his music?
No, I think you've covered it. He is an incredible songwriter and an artist. I follow him more for his film and TV career, if I'm being honest. But there is absolutely songs like Redbone, This Is America, and other albums that I think are fantastic. But I think for me, it's all about his filmography.
Yeah, so I will touch on his music just like at the same time that he's working on projects, but I won't mention and recommend songs for you guys anymore. I can shut off about
Toby,
it.
we love your recommendations.
Yeah. So he begun Atlanta, which is probably his biggest show, I'm going to say.
I think it is. I do think it is. And it's, again, like many TV shows, found a new life on streaming. It really has. People are revisiting the show, realizing the talent of the people involved.
Yeah, and it is a really brilliant show. I would 100% recommend it. So it begun development in 2013. It's an FX series. And it was originally just announced as a 10-episode season in 2015, and then premiered in 2016. But it was immediately critically acclaimed. So Glover, just showing off how talented he is. He writes, directs on occasion, not every episode, but he directs a lot of them. And he's also the executive producer, and he stars. Sorry, too many N's in there. But he is so involved in this production, and it is brilliant. So some of the accolades that it has won is, I'm going to have to take a breath here, Golden Globe Awards for Best Television Series, Musical or Comedy. He won Best Actor for Television Series, Musical or Comedy. It won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series. It won Outstanding Director for a Comedy Series, which made Glover the first black man to win this Emmy in history, which is fantastic. So those are his accolades for the show, which is ridiculously outstanding for him. He's done really well with it. If you do want to watch it, it is streaming on Hulu or Disney Plus, I believe.
Yeah. And from what I can gather, it's also available on SBS. People want to watch it for free.
Yes, it is
well.
on SBS.
So if people don't have Disney Plus or Hulu, we can make a recommendation for a free way of watching it, which is
I actually
SBS
discovered Atlanta through SBS. There was the FIFA World Cup, and they were streaming on SBS.
Of course, yes, and they did a lot of promotion for Atlanta being one of their
Yes. So I was watching the FIFA World Cup at work, and then I saw Atlanta was on it. I'm like, oh, that's Childish Gambino. I better watch this. So that's actually one of the ways that I got into a lot of his shows rather than just his music. But yeah, so I think Atlanta is just a fantastic show. I'd 100% recommend watching it.
Definitely.
It really demonstrates that wicked comedy that I was talking about. There's some of the earlier episodes, which I think are fantastic, there's that scene that you talked about in the Macca's or whatever fast food it was.
Yeah.
Which just shows off like this kind of funny, awkward situation that I feel like some people can actually understand. Like it's so bizarre that you need to be a child to get the kids.
And I think that's what Donald Glover does well, is he creates these scenarios that feel real.
Yeah.
And even in something that's quite out there, such as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, he creates these moments where you go, this is relatable. This is down to earth, but entertaining nonetheless, even if it's a moment where it's just two people talking.
I think it's the way that he writes interactions between people, where it's like, I feel like a lot of shows, they shy away from that kind of awkwardness where it's we're not all that smooth. Like a lot of the time, we're just trying to like survive in any social circumstance, and I think that's something that he does really well. And it's also some of the reactions that he does. Yes. In like to certain situations in Atlanta, especially, there's some situations that he puts the characters in, and it's just kind of like you would react in the same way, where you just kind of like, what the fuck? Like it's the only way that I can describe it. As compared to like, I feel like some shows are just got to like really, emotion, like throw everything into it to try and make this like a really big deal. But like sometimes it's like a shooting and they're just kind of like, what's happening? Like, it's just so weird.
I actually agree. I think one of my favorite parts of his writing and his acting is the reactions to certain moments. And I know we'll get onto it, Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yeah.
But I love whenever they have a strange encounter.
Yeah.
The conversations they have afterwards will make you laugh.
Yes.
It is brilliant.
Yeah.
Where it's just like anyone leaving a party, and for our listeners, you all do this, where you'll leave a party with your boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it may be, and you'll go, did you hear what so-and-so said? And then you start talking about it, and, and sometimes it's the best part. It's just, engaging people, being like, that was a strange interaction.
Yeah, deconstructing it after.
Deconstructing moments. And even, I love how some of it's also self-deprecating.
Yeah.
It's, did I actually just say that? Did I just do that? And he captures those moments that are really realistic and personal. And everyone does it differently. Some people don't talk about that stuff. Some people get quite anxious about it, whatever it may be. And all these characters have different reactions to certain moments.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it, where it's never just, they don't just take the piss out of someone they were just with, but they do also talk about the things that they said themselves or some of the actions they did. And it's very funny.
Yeah. I think I'll recommend some episodes for people that might not want to watch the entire series, but experience like this sort of surreal comedy, even somewhat horror-esque situations. Yep. There's an episode in season 2 of Atlanta called Teddy Perkins. It is hilarious. It's if you enjoy Get Out, if you enjoy Jordan Peele, watch this episode. It is so funny. It's based around one of the main characters, Darius, going to get a free piano. And he just goes to like this mansion with this very old famous artist who is insane. And Charles Gambino actually plays the artist. He's another actor. He plays another character, sorry. But for this one, he borderline does whiteface. But it's funny because I don't know if it's meant to be like a rip of Michael Jackson type of look where it's like this, very famous star. It's just kind of crazy and creepy. Very funny episode. That's what I'd recommend for anyone who wants to get into it. But also there's some big names in Atlanta in general, some massive actors, just in general. So I think it's definitely worth a watch. Sorry. So we'll move on throughout Glover's career because I don't want to talk about Atlanta too much. In April 2017, Times named Glover in its annual 100 most influential people in the world, which
What an
is
achievement. What an achievement.
Massive. And I think it's one of those things that's really interesting because he might not be a name all that well known to a lot of
You're right.
to people, but to be in 100 most influential people in the world in 2017, you'd think that you'd know at least half those names, right?
You're right, and I think it comes it comes down to the fact that he's a major writer, director. Some of these people, especially when you're watching not major studio films or major cinema releases, and even some musicians where you're going by a stage name, Childish Gambino and stuff, some people don't put Donald Glover and Childish Gambino together and things like that. And, us who follow the industry quite closely, we do. But for the general audience, they just enjoy the content they're listening to.
Yep.
And a lot of the influential and unique entertainment coming out in the comedy sphere, Donald Glover has worked with these people or he's attached to the project. And it's amazing to see that Time sort of acknowledged that and showed his influence through the media he produces.
Yeah. So some other notable things, I'll try and run through this a little bit faster. I'm going to talk about his music very briefly. 2017, Glover said he would retire the name Childish Gambino. He didn't. To put it plainly, he released his probably most famous song, This Is America, in 2018.
Yeah, I think that's when I really noticed his appeal to the wide audience because everyone was talking about that. That music video was huge.
Yeah, so it was a debut #1 hit. Talking about the music video that was directed by Hiro Mura. I hope I said that right.
Yeah.
Who he works with before. So Hiro actually directed a lot of the episodes for Atlanta and for Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
I noticed that when I was watching.
Yeah, so that's
a great episode too.
So it's big. So the director that he's obviously working with a lot of his work, that very famous music video was also directed by him, which I think is really cool.
Yeah,
so at the same time, he was doing Solo, a Star Wars story, as you said. He played Lando Calrissian. I probably butchered that.
Calrissian.
Thank you.
As the podcast Star Wars fan here.
Yeah, so just to be kind of blatantly, the movie was not all that well received, but Glover was actually praised for his performance. So I think that says that even in the worst stuff he does, he's the best.
I've got a few things to say about that. I am one of those people that think the issue with Solo is not in the execution, but it's in the decision to make a Solo prequel, right? I think what they gave us is a perfectly fun, enjoyable popcorn entertainment flick, seeing the origins of Han Solo.
Yep.
Okay? I think it had two directors, but the one that ultimately took over, which was Ron Howard, who was a incredibly famous director, he managed to do a lot with it. I think some of the performances, you have Woody Harrelson, you have Emilia Clarke, their characters are interesting and I'd want to see more of them in the Star Wars universe. But I think the whole negative press around Solo came from creative decisions in regards to the directors who fell out with the studio, but also just the idea of us needing a spin-off with
Yeah.
Han Solo. But I think what they gave us was a perfectly enjoyable film. And I think Donald Glover's performance was not utilized enough. That's probably a main criticism of the film, because he is fantastic as Lando Calrissian. Again, I think that the issue of the project came down to we did need to see Lando Calrissian reimagined. We didn't need to see him as a a younger person. That is a real sort of the trend within Hollywood now, that we're even getting a lot of prequels this year coming out. But I do have to say that I think Glover's performance was amazing in a film that was good.
Yeah.
It was good. It was fine.
Yeah. Talking about prequels though, really quickly, is that it's been told that Glover will be working on another series for Lando Calrissian. I can't say his name for the life of me.
Yep, Lando Calrissian. Yep.
But yeah, so it was originally meant to be a TV show, but it looks like it's going to be more likely a movie now. They say it might be because of the writer's strikes, which is interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, there's not a whole lot of news about that just yet. I mean, Glover's been exceptionally busy this last year with acting and a lot of his work. But I thought that was interesting news. Also, to backtrack to Community, if anyone has watched the show and they know 6 seasons in a movie, there is a word that there is a movie being made.
And he is set to return.
Yeah, Dan Harmon has quoted that he thinks Glover will return for the Community movie. I think
apparently he is interested in the project, to say the least.
The only one who sounds like they're completely out is Chevy Chase.
Of course. And that's, who could blame him?
Yeah. But yeah, so I think another big work of Glover, was he worked on Guava Island. The film was actually written by his brother, Stephen Glover, and directed by Hiro Murai, who did the This Is America one. It stars Glover as a musician who throws a festival in his hometown, and it co-starring Rihanna, massive name. It released in 2019 on Amazon, who we see him work with a lot for a lot of his current shows. One of the other massive things that happened in 2019, of course, was the live-action Lion King.
Yeah.
Glover portrayed adult Simba. It was directed by Jon Favreau. Thank you. Known for Iron Man, he actually plays Happy. So if you want to put a face to it, I like to give the actor some time.
He does play Happy, and he was also in Chef as well.
Yes, yeah, of course. It grossed $1.6 billion worldwide, so it's the 9th highest grossing film of all time.
One of the major successful remakes of the animated classics. Yes. The Lion King, whilst it had very mixed reviews, it was, from a money point of view and even from a visual performance point of view, it was revolutionary and successful.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting to see how I don't think any of the re-releases have captured the box office quite like The Lion King did.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I'm still one of those people that if you want to watch Lion King, watch The Lion King, the original.
I agree. I only watched this one for Donald Glover. He's singing, so I was like, of course I'm going to listen to this. I probably could have just listened to the album, but I love The Lion King. The original Lion King's fantastic. I didn't think it was terrible.
No.
It did fine. It doesn't capture the magic.
Unnecessary.
Yeah, it doesn't capture the magic. But I think one of the really interesting things is the director, John, allowed Glover to re-record his lines after his father's death, because Glover said that it made him feel more emotionally attached to the script, which I think is really nice, and probably added to his performance. I think we'll move into his recent work.
Of course, yeah.
So he released a show, Swarm, last year, 2023. It's a horror TV show. It follows a character called Dre, a young woman whose obsession with a pop star takes a dark turn. That's basically the synopsis for it. I've started it. I haven't finished it. It is very dark compared to a lot of his other work. As I said, like there's kind of like that surreal horror in his other stuff. This one's graphic. Like it has some very dark themes to it. I'd still recommend it. The first episode was very interesting. And I think it's meant to be kind of like a dig at like this obsession with pop stars. Very relevant with Taylor Swift going on right now. I think this one was more based on like the Beyonce type character.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I think that was a really interesting one.
That was an Amazon production as well?
Yes, Amazon. Yeah. It was praised for its direction, cinematography, and soundtrack. I don't know too much about the story itself, but I'll watch it and get back to it. I think it's an interesting one to look out for. His most recent work, however, which is done significantly better, let's say, perhaps more known, is Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yeah, let's talk about Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Yes, this is a show that we've both seen, and it's brand new. So this is a relevant, a new TV show available on streaming. It is available on Amazon Prime. It's an Amazon Prime original series. as we've said before, it's based off the story that we got in 2005's Mr. and Mrs. Smith, starring Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
So to sum up sort of what it's about for those who maybe haven't seen the original or don't quite remember what it is, it's about two strangers who land jobs with a spy agency that offers them a life of espionage, wealth, and travel. And the catch is that their new identities, they are new identities in an actual arranged marriage.
Yeah, I think it's slightly different in plot to the original one.
That was what I was going to say.
I think the original Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I haven't watched it in a good couple of years. It's still a fantastic movie, but I think it was the couple were both part of spy agencies, and they just happened to be assigned to kill each other, if I'm not right.
Yes.
And this one, it's a little bit more like they're set up to work together. So a lot of the early episodes about them being spies essentially together. I don't want to spoil too much for it because it's definitely a watch. I would recommend it.
It is. I would too.
It's been fairly well received as well, for its worth. And I've got some fun facts for you here as well. So this is from IMDb. They said John Smith's mother, or Charles Gambino's mother, is actually played by Donald Glover's mother, his actual mother, which is really interesting. She did a good performance as well.
Great performance. I really enjoyed her character.
Yeah,
she was really good.
She was in the one episode, not like a massive part of it, but part of the story to some extent. But yeah, performance for her it's good to see her in there.
Yeah.
This one was actually, I find, really interesting. Phoebe Waller-Bridge worked in production for about 6 months, and she was actually set to act as Mrs. Smith.
I could see it.
But she exited the project due to creative differences. People who don't know Phoebe Waller-Bridge, or people that know the name but not what it's from, she is well known for Fleabag, which is a brilliant show. I would highly recommend watching. And she's also in up and coming If film.
She is, and she's worked with Donald Glover before in Solo, so she has been in some major productions. And Fleabag, I mean, people know her for that. She deserves so many awards.
And that is a brilliant TV show. Well written, well directed as well. So I think it's one of those things where I would have loved to see them work together. It's like so close to like this love child of like perfection. But it is a shame to see her leave. I mean, creative differences, I hope it was like pleasantries, and it's just like they didn't see eye to eye on how they wanted the direction to go.
And I see that for them. You know,
fine.
They both have very distinct styles.
Yes.
And I'm sure that it just came down to the project was ultimately Glover's to control, and Waller-Bridge will go on to do other amazing things, I'm sure.
Yes. So some of the ratings, it's 6.9 on IMDb. It's a little lower than I would give it myself.
So it's lower than I would give it too.
But 89% on Rotten Tomatoes and 3.8 on Google reviews.
But I think from what I've seen, it's again the concept over the execution. It's the fact that people are like, why would we not just watch the American woman doing
Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, 2005, starring Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. Like, that has everything you possibly want in a story that isn't that complex, right?
I think maybe it was the flaw to attach the name to it. It's always easier to work on an existing IP. We've talked about that. But yeah, I think it is one of those things that could have just been a standalone story. Change their names, have it Mr. and Mrs. White. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's one of those things, like, if you'd remove the IP, it nearly would have performed better, because you do have, like, these original fans who are like, it's stupid, why are they using this name? Like, the story was fine. Like, I agree with them, the story's fine, stand alone.
Right, yeah.
But this is kind of a completely new story. So I think if you go in with, like, the eye that it's a new story that just happens to have the same IP, it works perfectly fine.
I'd just like to go through some of the cast and crew involved in the production before we sort of give you our review of the TV show. Well, it stars Maya Erskine, who it might be Erskine, I apologize, but she plays Jane, so the co-lead with Donald Glover, who plays John, so John and Jane Smith. You also have Michaela Cole, John Turturro, who was in The Batman.
Yep. You
also have Wagner Moura, and the series has been directed by some big names, including Karina Evans, Hiro Murai, who we said did come. This is America.
Yep.
Amy Schmeitz, and Donald Glover. So you can see that they've had quite a lot of people involved. But I would just like to mention that for those who are interested in mainstream sort of Hollywood projects, some of the support acts in this film, I'm just going to list off some names who I won't even need to mention what they've been in.
Yeah.
You've got Paul Dano, who, I'm going to mention what he's been in because he was actually the Riddler in the new Batman film and was incredible in that.
Yes.
You also have Alexander Skarsgård. You have Tarzan himself in it. You have Ron Perlman. You have John Turturro, who I've mentioned. Isa Gonzalez, who obviously from Baby Driver, Ambulance. And you have Sarah Paulson, who has been in some incredible films. And and she plays the therapist in a certain scene.
Yeah.
So you have an incredible support of people who are in it for not very long,
No.
but they deliver tremendous performances and clearly believe in this project.
Yeah.
So why don't we get into some of the positive elements of the film? Do you want to?
The show, yeah.
Of the TV show, I apologize.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was good fun. Obviously, I'm a massive fan of Donald Glover. I got some bias, in just his acting especially, but his creation in general, anything that he works on. But even then, it was an enjoyable watch. I thought it was a unique take on the original story. As I said, I don't think it would have mattered all that much if they just called it Mr. and Mrs. White and taken away the IP. It's a separate story. I think if you go into it with that mindset and you don't hold the original one so sacred, it's an enjoyable watch essentially. So I think, in that sense, it's not revolutionary. I don't think it does anything amazing. I think it tells a fun story of basically a romantic partnership, but also with spy stuff, but then also measures them in to show how people have conflicts. And I think that's unique in what it does. And it's also just a good watch. I think it's pretty mindless. I was watching it at night before I go to bed and stuff like that. So all around, I'd say maybe 8 claps would be my rating for it. Look, it could be a difficult one to rewatch. I'm hoping there's another season where it continues to stay at this pace. And I think if it's, a complete series where we'll get a finale that kind of explains the entire story, I'll enjoy it more. But yeah, for now, I'm comfortable with 8 claps for it.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think the chemistry between Donald Glover and Maya Erskine is really good.
Yeah.
I think that the 2 lead cast members did a fantastic job. Obviously, Donald Glover, but also Jane as well was really good in it.
Yes.
As I've said, the support actors, I thought the opening was really good with Alexander Skarsgård and Isaac Gonzalez. I thought the cinematography really impressed me.
Yeah.
Thought the production values of it, especially episode 3 at the ski resort.
Yes. Yeah.
That really stood out to me.
That was good.
That was really well done. I thought the action sequence, and then they used a lot of aerial shots.
They were cool.
But they also used the ski resort location very well. There were a lot of interesting elements to that. I thought there were a lot of really good editing moments as well, especially the cross-cutting between moments for John and Jane. So the experience that Jane's having and John's having, and sometimes they're telling stories and they're sort of manipulating the truth a little bit because the truth comes a lot into the story.
Yeah.
They did very well at cross-cutting between the two, and you were very interested in what that person had to say about this person and that person had to say this person. So as I said, there's a genuine connection between the lead actors. Really, really great dialogue as well, where I'm interested in what these characters have to say. I thought especially when they're leaving the therapy session and they're joking about something the therapist said.
Yeah.
And it just felt natural. It felt real. It felt like what a lot of relationships have that, that I've seen and, been in, where you have these moments where you can laugh about something really stupid, and they have those genuine moments. I thought that the main thing that worked for me was actually just the story in the context of a TV show.
Yeah.
I think that was a major flaw, in my opinion, of the 2005 film, where because they didn't have a lot of time, they developed the relationship between the lead actors as essentially lust. They both thought that they were attractive. They loved each other for that reason. And I'm saying there was a lot more to it, but because of time, it had to be I love you, you're hot, and that was sort of what it felt like. I'm not saying that's all it was, but it's what it felt like.
Yeah.
In this case, because it was a TV show, an 8-part TV show, they had the ability to really delve into a relationship.
Yeah.
And had time to spend with these characters. And so I thought that worked really well, that it's a really good translation to a TV show, and I thought that was a great decision by Amazon.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it felt a lot more genuine. It felt a lot more focused on the relationship between the 2 leads. And I'd give it 8 claps as well. I'd tell anyone who has Amazon Prime to go watch it. I don't think it's worth getting a subscription to watch it. I think it's enjoyable. It doesn't offer anything new outside of a new take on the already existing story, but it does deliver a really interesting TV show that has a great formula to it in terms of a new mission sort of every episode, and there's one that is told through a therapy session.
Yeah.
And you sort of see flashbacks to the missions that they went on. And I thought it was a great way of showing the development of their relationship. So it offered something new every episode whilst keeping a really consistent formula.
Yeah.
If you have Amazon Prime and you do enjoy the spy genre or even relationship dramas,
Yeah.
if you like either of those, you'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's not perfect.
No.
But it's good.
Here's what I would recommend. If you have Amazon, watch it, obviously. But if you're going to get Amazon for the boys and you're waiting for the next season each week to come, binge watch it in between. It's definitely worth a watch as well.
It is.
You'll have it there available. It's a bit lighter than the boys next season, I imagine, will be. But that's something that you can plan out for when that comes through.
Do you have anything that maybe holds it back from being that 10?
Oh, I think it's limited in what it can do. Realistically,
Yeah.
I think the spy genre in itself, it's very hard to make a flawless spy film because there's only so many stories that you can tell where it's realistically interesting. What holds it away from a 10 for me right now is just that first and foremost, it's an incomplete story. I'm assuming they set it up for another season. If they are leaving it on the cliffhanger, it's still interesting, still like worth the watch, and I still think there's enough of an arc there to complete it. And
I would agree.
leave it
Yeah.
at that. There's nothing like it. It's not a genre that like hooks me in to the same extent that something that I'd rate a 10 as. I feel like whenever I rate something a 10 or something really high, like above a 9 realistically, I feel like it needs to kind of produce something deeper than just the surface level that's being told. And as much as this one had like this sort of somewhat deeper connection with talking about like how we approach relationships and communication and stuff like that, it was still just it just used the conversation through like the work of being a spy at the same time, and it's not revolutionary. I still thought it done really, really well, and it was really interesting. But yeah, I can't imagine as compared to something like Atlanta, which has like a lot of deeper meanings to it, and it talks a lot about American society and particularly the society in Atlanta, which I think is very important and done very well in that show as compared to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, where it's just kind of like relationship spies, enjoyable. So therefore, it's just kind of capped by what it can achieve.
I agree with that. I think for me, what holds it back is the story itself doesn't have the ability to go much further than it does.
Yeah.
It is restricted in terms of its, two people who are spies who are forced into an arranged marriage and have to navigate a relationship while also going on difficult missions. There's only so much you can do with that, but what they do, I think, reaches the heights of what it can in terms of story. I think there's a few issues I have with it that, again, they're not issues, but they're more minor things that I think in season 2 could be different, where I think it's quite predictable in parts.
Yep.
There were a few things I saw coming. Again, not a bad thing, but you could have surprised me more in certain parts, even if it's minor things like how a mission wraps up or something like that. There were times I think there was a few pacing issues where it felt like they were, obviously it's a TV show, but sort of restricted in where they could go in terms of a mission.
Yeah.
Or that they were trying to say something about a character that I kind of already got through the incredible acting of its cast.
Yeah.
That I feel like certain things didn't need to ever be said or told to us in the way that they were.
That's fair.
I'm not saying that it harms the viewing experience, but it's just one of those things where there were minor things that could have been touched up to keep that consistent pace going through the show.
Yep. Well, yeah, do we just want to have any final words about Donald Glover as a creator?
I mean, what more can I say besides he is clearly an immensely individual person within not only film and TV, but music. He is continuing to go in incredible directions. I really hope to see more of him in Star Wars if they're going in that direction, because I think that's a major franchise that his immensely good writing and producing abilities could go to.
Yep.
I want to see him produce more music. I want to see where he can go in terms of comedy and taking new directions in terms of his filmography. He is absolutely influential and should be talked about more within Hollywood and the entertainment industry as a whole. And I hope he gets more and more accolades and produces more and more great content like Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. You very much hit on a nerve there when you said he needs to release more music, because yes, he does. Please, release another album. But yeah, no, even just for his work in TV and possibly some more cinema we might see, I'm keen. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, but I feel like with his name attached, I would definitely be more inclined to go see a movie. So yeah, I'm keen to see what he does. Very influential, very much under talked about in the TV and cinema scene as compared to his music, perhaps. And that's why I'm glad we were able to discuss him today. I think it's fantastic for us and for listeners who may not have known a great deal of details about Glover. But yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, and we look forward to the Community movie. Make sure he's in it.
Yes.
He has to be in it.
Oh, my Troy Barnes back.
We'd like to thank you for listening to this part of the show. We know this is quite, 2 episodes this week. This is a longer episode as well, talking about Mr. Glover. But the truth is, we thought he was someone absolutely worth talking about. We want to do more of episodes like this, talking about the relevant filmmakers and producers, directors, anyone within the entertainment industry and the incredible work they're doing in entertaining us every day. And we hope to bring you more of this in the future. Do you have any thoughts on episodes like this, or have any recommendations or people you'd like to see us engage with? We're very keen to hear your thoughts. Again, as always, thank you very much for listening to the Clap Podcast. Please share us with anyone you know, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much for listening.